We spoke to a security expert who says that kind of protection is a good idea, but should not be the sole security plan. Mark Quimby says helping provide true response times before a shooting can even help more.
Shots fired. People are running out of the business.
A security guard helped evacuate more than 100 people.
An alert security officer is being hailed as a hero for thwarting an apparent shooting plot.
Good morning, everybody. It's Mike Hefner, Thin Yellow Line Podcast. Excited to be back here in the saddle.
Mark Quimby, also ready to be back to it.
And before we get to our guest, do you want to tell everybody about your difficulties here? This podcast almost didn't happen.
It's been, like I said, it's been a comedy of errors this morning. Sometimes you have a morning like that, and it's been one of those mornings for me. Truck issues, recording issues, but as we say in the Marine Corps, I don't know what y'all said in the Army, but in the Marine Corps we said improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's what we've done here. As you can tell, I'm a little congested. We've had a 40-degree swing in 24 hours, so that's hashtag Alabama. So welcome to the deciduous rainforest, where we have all four seasons in a matter of a week.
Yeah, I understand that you would say that, but did you understand?
I did.
Okay.
Mildly.
Okay. Mark, why don't you? We're very excited about the show today and our the topic and our guest in particular. And so, Mark, why don't you do the honors?
All right. So yeah, we've got Rick McCann on with us. Rick is the founder and CEO of Private Officer International. It's an amazing organization. Something we stumbled upon a few months ago. We've been looking at the newsletters and looking at how we might get involved as a corporation and as individuals in our profession with some of the things that they have to offer. And really impressive deal that Rick's put together. And rather than me try to stumble over myself and steal his thunder, Rick, I'm going to just pass it off to you, let you kind of introduce yourself and what Private Officer International is all about, understanding that you're speaking to frontline professionals that may not have been familiar with what you guys are doing.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Really appreciate what you guys do in Birmingham. Very familiar with the area. I lived in Birmingham and have a home down in Fairhope on the Gulf Coast area, where we call it LA, Lower Alabama down there. The name of the organization is Private Officer International. It was founded in 2002, and it became an international association in 2004. We currently have members in 37 countries. We're the second largest security association in the U.S. And our association is a little bit different than ASIS or other organizations. We started the whole association as a way for us to reach out and to assist frontline officers, both public and private, in their training needs and their recognition. And we've developed quite an organization through the years because of the people that, a lot of folks don't realize there's about 1.6 million private security officers in the U.S. alone, and that includes retail, plainclothes, uniform. But our organization also in recent years has taken on the electronic security field as well. We have regulatory agents who are members. We have law enforcement who are members from local, state, and federal agencies. We have a whole bunch of folks that don't work frontline security, but they're involved in other areas of protecting our country.
Awesome. One of the things that I've noticed that you guys are doing that I've mentioned before internally that I wish there was an organization doing, having not yet found you guys, and that's the officer down piece. It's a somber thing to think about, but there's a lot of men and women, as you say, 1.6 million, which is twice as many sworn law enforcement officers that there are in the United States, and we certainly have tons of respect for law enforcement and what they do and the sacrifices made by those men and women. Likewise with EMTs and fire and rescue in the military. There's lots of organizations that are drawing attention to those sacrifices and those other areas, and it's great to see that you guys are investing the time. And I assume it does take a lot of time tracking all that down and reporting it, but You're doing it in a very respectful way. And so maybe go on a little bit about the officer down piece and how that come to fruition.
Well, I started in security myself when I was just 17. My brother at the time was a regional manager for a private security company in Connecticut where I grew up. So at a young age, I began to work in the private security field. And at the same time, he was a law enforcement officer. My uncle was a law enforcement officer. And at the age of 17, I became a police explorer. So I got to do some ride-alongs, and I joined the military later that year and have been in law enforcement myself for 40 years plus, and in the security industry since I was 17. I'm also a certified firefighter and a paramedic and work in all the public safety arenas, but I found that a lot of people just don't realize how dangerous private security is and has been, but in the last 25 years has increased, especially since 9/11. And we wanted to find a way to be able to collect the statistics and the data that backs up this claim that it's a dangerous industry and to recognize those who are killed every year. So in 2007, we actually began a full-time news department. So we have professional journalists who collect news from 2,500 news sources. We have professionals who write material. We verify all of the information, and we've been able to provide to the U.S. Department of Justice and several other state and federal regulatory agencies statistics that show what's happening in the security industry. And so our news resources comes from the fact that we collect all that data every single day. We actually have staff on duty 16 hours a day in the news department, and that's their sole job, is to collect and report news and collect data.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's as we look at the kind of the impetus for the doing the podcast and why we wanted to get this thing off the ground, from our perspective, it seems like so much of the profession, the public awareness is centered around negative events, and there's not really as much recognition of the of the risks that the men and women, and of which you alluded to, there's so many out there, the risks that they take day in and day out as being willing to serve as a security officer, and that it truly is a noble profession, and it truly is a significant civic duty that everyone is doing. And so much of what you see in the media, like for example, yesterday, the huge piece in the USA Today about G4S and the problems that they're having, and and we're not here to bash a competitor or anything like that, but those kinds of negative media coverage is typically what you see, and you don't, because there's no huge draw when there's a security officer in front of a bank, or a security officer at a entertainment nightclub event, when nothing happens and everything goes as it should, because there was a adequate, proper, well-trained security there. That doesn't make the news. But if that security officer makes a mistake or something happened, then that's what gets highlighted. And so we're trying to do our piece to make sure that everyone in the profession has as much of a voice as possible, and that we can highlight the great work that's being done out there.
You're exactly right. And going back to the officer down report, because of the dedicated employees that we have, we've been able to enlighten, like I said, not only state and federal regulatory agencies and the U.S. Department of Justice and other law enforcement, but we have, since day one, every year we have a memorial the third week of September, and we provide memorial services across the nation at different sponsored locations where we have a full memorial service that honors and recognizes the private security officers killed that year. And most people don't realize this, and you may not either, but on average, the security industry averages 118 security officers that die while on duty in the line of duty every year. 86.9% of those are killed by gunfire. Very few are killed by traffic accidents or heart attacks or other work-related injuries as you see occur in law enforcement, because we just don't pursue people. We don't drive a lot. We're not doing rescues per se. And so most of the injuries sustained by security officers or deaths are those who are in the performance of their duty trying to stop a bad guy. Last year, according to our statistics and the Department of Labor, 26,177 security officers who were assaulted on the job.
Wow.
So through our information and stats and efforts, we've been able to highlight what the security officer really is doing on the front line with the media, with regulatory agencies, with law enforcement, and the memorial services has really served as a good avenue to get the word out. We've been recognized in the last 10 years by U.S. senators, by governors of 17 states. We annually hold service in Alabama. We just had one last year in Versailles. We had, and we're in Nashville, Tennessee every year. We always have big turnout in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been recognized by police chiefs and other organizations. So there's a lot of recognition now that's happening, because I don't want to say just our efforts, but definitely a lot does have to do with what we've been doing for the last 16 years.
Well, I think it's very necessary. I've been in now at this point in the industry for going on 14 years. And one thing that's really struck me, and especially seen it from the very frontline security officer level up through management, is just how frequently these security professionals, the men and women of our industry, are averting crises. I mean, that truly every day that there are just countless times where it could be way worse than it was, save the efforts of somebody in a security uniform or somebody fulfilling that duty. And frankly, you know, the pay not really matching that responsibility, certainly in the moment where everything hits the fan per se. And so I think organizations like yours, and even as is to some degree, you know, I think it's important for the general public to learn, especially post 9/11. We you know, how technology is really blending cybersecurity and physical security. Those lines are starting to blur, and just the responsibility and competency it takes for somebody to be a professional security officer in 2019 and beyond. I think it's important for organizations like yours to be doing what you're doing so that the general public learns that this truly is a profession. And I think, you know, we all have seen the Barney Fife stereotype, the Paul Blart Mall Cop stereotype, and certainly there's probably some security out there unregulated that maybe matches that a little more than we would like it to. But the reality is there are lots of people out there, true professionals that are absolutely dedicated to the task at hand, that take very seriously what they're doing. And I think it's high time that the general public be exposed to the kind of information that will educate them that this truly is a profession, that it's not law enforcement light. And somebody with your background certainly understands this, that the security professionals aren't watered down law enforcement. It's a very different job, you know, public sector to private sector, and all the things that they have to do, and being a true customer service representative of their firm and the client, and being able to flip that switch back and forth, and being ready for the worst case scenario in a world where the worst case scenario gets pretty bad. And so we certainly appreciate organizations like yours that are highlighting that. Something else that I kind of wanted to get you to dig into, if you don't mind, is the training and then the certifications that Private Officer International offers. I was something that I was been looking into, and certainly want to get on a track to do some of the certifications. You mind digging into that a little bit?
No, before I do, I just want to comment on what you were saying, and also the article that the USA Today did on G4S. Although it highlighted the negative aspects, it also highlighted something else that you may not have recognized, and that is the area where private security is heading today. It highlighted the fact that G4S was privatized in prisons, in juvenile facilities, and holding detentions for ICE, that it has a private police force that is sworn law enforcement, in many of their properties. And actually, in 33 states, there are laws on the books that allow private security to be private police officers. In Washington, D.C., they currently have 17,000 sworn private security who have law enforcement authority in the District of Columbia. Those officers work every place in the city that you can imagine, from shopping centers to apartment complexes to campuses and colleges and hospitals. If you go to any website in DC, you'll see it say Special Police. They're commissioned by the District of Columbia as police officers on the property where they have been contracted or employed to work. G4S really started this when they came into the industry in the U.S. and bought Wackenhut, because Wackenhut was just getting into the private law enforcement when they were bought out by G4S. And we're seeing more and more diversified services in the private security industry than ever before, because law enforcement is understaffed, under-budgeted. A lot of the contracts are going to private security. Since 9/11, private security is getting more involved in areas that really isn't just observe and report, but more proactive and hands-on. And that's where the industry is going. And we have to prove to the client the value of our service. And we do that by staying current with technology, recruitment, training. You know, training is a big part of it. Most of the injuries that we see involving security officers is because of a lack of training. They're just not properly trained adequately for the job that they're being assigned. It's no longer just a factory. You know, when I first got into it, I was at a factory, you know, and we were at a guard post that we drank coffee and listened to the radio and read the newspaper, to be honest with you. That's not the case anymore. It's now a lot more proactive patrolling. We just had a security officer last week, 84 years old, shot and killed. He was out patrolling a large complex, industrial complex, no two-way radio, no weapon, just him alone, 3:15 in the morning, and he happens to catch a suspicious person breaking into a tractor trailer, and they shot and killed him. So it's just the security industry is changing, and in order to stay on top of it, we really have to put all the pieces together, and technology and training definitely is one of them. But to go back to what you asked about the training, in 2009, we were able to buy a college in Richmond, Virginia. It was a regular 2-year college, and we converted all of the training to public safety curriculum. So we're an accredited trade school for law enforcement, firefighting, EMS, private security, and other medical and legal training. But even prior to that, we offered a lot of online and in-person training. So we have physical college campuses and online campus. And we also train on site. So we travel a lot, training at different companies. We just came back from Montana, training at a tribal public safety agency. And we do a lot of church security type stuff. So we're always training. We have instructors throughout the country. And we have 5 campuses, and we're actually opening one in Alabama.
Now, are your students and those that go through your programs, is most of that individual seeking out the training? Is it corporate sponsored where the company is running their employees through there? Is it a combination? How is it working currently?
Yeah, we have both individuals that seek out the training, whether it be regulatory, like for the guard card in Alabama or other states. We also have folks who want to be EMTs or firefighters. But we have a lot of company-sponsored training. We have major contracts with security agencies, no names mentioned. And we do a lot of business with state and federal government employees, colleges, churches, and they do sponsor and pay for the training. But we also have another program, which is pretty unique, where we have about 5 years ago began designing training courses specific to the company's needs. And then for one flat fee, they have a community online school of their own where their employees can benefit from that training, and then we recycle it with new training every 6 to 12 months, depending on the need of the company.
Excellent. Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
no.
Hey, Rick, before we, I'll let Mark go. I'm cutting him off here. I wanted to kind of take a step
Well, you're
back.
the boss, right? You can cut them off. Yeah.
I know where my lane is.
Rank has his privileges every now and then.
If the boss walks out, I'll talk bad about him too.
I wanted to ask you just a little bit more in what you know, how did this whole thing get started? What did you identify the need and say, hey, here's the need that needs to be filled? Did you see a business opportunity? I mean, why did this whole thing get started back in the beginning?
With the association, it was just because I grew up in the industry when like I said, I started when I was 17, and I began seeing that there was a big lack of training, a recognition of the officers, and then as I was working through law enforcement, several different agencies, we saw the times when the security was involved in serious incidents and they just wasn't getting the help or the recognition. And I've been a police and fire instructor for more than 30 years. And so when the school opportunity came to us, we jumped on that in 2009. And now we're expanding. Last year, we went into a franchise system, and we're expanding. Our latest campus is in Des Moines, Iowa. So, we know that the training is a component of having quality services in any industry, but specifically in the security industry where you're being hired to protect people. If you can't protect yourself, how can you protect others?
Exactly.
Right. The question I had, Rick, was going back to the certifications. In our industry, you go on LinkedIn and you're kind of touching base with some of your peers, and you see CPP and PSP and a lot of these as-is based certifications and abbreviations after everybody's name. And I noticed that you guys are offering something similar to that. And I kind of wanted to see if you could dig into that and how that's structured and what the intent behind those various modules are, and just kind of highlight those, because it seemed to me that there are a lot of opportunities, different types of certifications that seem targeted at every level of security professional, not necessarily just at the very top, which sort of that is the impression a lot of times people have when you talk to new security officers on a fairly tight budget, just digging into their career, trying to qualify for even the PSP. And I know that ASIS has recently added a more junior version of that. But can you kind of expand upon how your certifications with Private Officer International work and sort of the intent behind them?
Sure. With as-is, they targeted, and I've been a member for many years, they targeted the upper management level of the private security industry, the people who could pay the money, to be frank with you. And as we know, frontline people, they cannot pay those high entry-level membership fees and training fees. And recognizing that, we structured our training for frontline and mid-management people and company owners that have less than 500 employees. And so we actually have 14 credentials that are recognized by the industry. We've had them now for more than 15 years, since we began almost, and we've added to them every year. And our credentials, what happens is you'll get 4 modules every month that you can study, and then you take a exam, and then you progress to the next level until all of those modules have been taken, and then you take a final exam. And some of those also require a practical, so we have to have it proctored either through someone that's been certified in the area, or you may have to go to another point to be proctored. All of our training can be done online, but also we do a lot of it at the company's location. So we have a lot of agreements with companies, not only contract security, but hospitals and colleges and other businesses, corporate security, where we go there and we'll do the whole thing in a week. So we knock it out in 4 or 5 days, and they're certified.
Awesome.
We also certify I don't know if you guys know this or not, but in like places like Alabama, they require that security officers who carry handcuffs, tasers, less than lethal are all certified. So Alabama requires that now. So we go and we certify them in all of those areas. One of the problems that we run into in professional training is that everybody thinks they're a trainer, an instructor. I was a cop for 30 years. I can train you. No, you can't, because training has to be credentialed somehow. It has to be certified. It has to be accredited. And without that, all you're getting is a piece of paper.
Right. That's something that's really at the heart of our training program here. And I'm an instructor for everything that the ASRB instructs except for ECDs. I don't have a taser instructor certification. I've rode the Lightning a couple of times, in a training environment, not on the side of the road with the state
Are we
trooper.
sure about that?
Yeah.
I'll know when I hang up with you.
So no, you're very right, and the competency to use doesn't necessarily translate into the competency to teach, even with the certification. And I think that's why it's so important that regulatory entities require a certification, and a lot of these, for like firearms, the ASRB, Alabama Security Regulatory Board, requires you to be FBI, APOST, or NRA law enforcement firearms instructor, and all of those entities require instructor development courses as part of the certification. It's not just that, I can shoot a gun really well, so I must be able to teach. As you well know, that's not how it works. So it's great to hear you say that, because it's important, I think, for internally within the industry for us to have integrity in our training and never turn into, let's just check this box on a piece of paper that we can forward to the regulatory entity so that we can move forward and turn a profit, that we maintain the integrity and the ethics of what we're doing for the client, our officers, and the community at large, and making sure that we're truly preparing them for the responsibility. Because, when the rubber meets the road in one of these situations where certainly a use of force situation presents itself, the job title of the person involved, security officer, law enforcement officer, really doesn't matter. The functionality requirement is the same. And so we have to bear that in mind, certainly as leadership in the industry, so that we're preparing our people for that moment if it were to ever come.
As management of the company, one of your biggest nightmares is liability. And when you have a security officer involved in an incident, and they do go to court, they do get arrested, one of the things that the court looks at is their training credentials and records. I'm an expert witness on use of force for the court, and one of the first things they want to see is what type of certifications did they have and who certified them, because they take it all the way back to the instructor. And if he wasn't certified by any particular accreditation agency, then that document's worthless. And if it doesn't meet the training requirements of the state, again, it's not, doesn't count. It does, like, it doesn't exist. And so I have found over the years that if you're going to have people out there doing these type of jobs, you want to make sure the training isn't just from anybody, but it's from somebody who can hold water when they go to court. And they want to, the court is going to want to look at every record and touch every piece of paper and question everyone involved in their training. And if you can't put legitimate people in front of the court, then you're going to be held liable, especially in a civil case.
Right. And it's important for those instructors to know that they're tied to those people forever. I mean, they could quit your firm and go work for someone else, and if you're the last person that trained them, you better be ready to put your hand up and say, "I solemnly swear." So
yeah, exactly.
Hey, Rick, it's obvious to me that you and your organization is doing great work in terms of elevating the profession and elevating the skills and the capabilities of the entire Thin Yellow Line. And as a guy who's out trying to communicate the value proposition that a security organization can bring to a corporate client or to a governmental entity or an educational institution, inevitably there becomes an economic discussion. And we talked about the G4S situation and how they, said, hey, we can provide either an augmentation or replacement of law enforcement and do so at a lower cost point. And, one of the current, factors of the industry is that security officer wages are lower than I think any of us would like them to be. And so that,
and make more money.
yeah, and that the dilemma there, and I guess, as you have students in your classes and getting involved with your organization, the I guess the question is what do you say to them, and what do you say to corporate folks when you're out, sharing the value proposition of private security, how you address that issue and how you talk about it?
It's a complex situation. When you're dealing with contract security, there are some companies who are small to medium size who reject certain contracts. They're not going to bow down to that low billable rate because they value the employee. Then there are other companies who employees are still, unfortunately, just a number, and they're going to underbid and undercut everything that you do. G4S and other large companies like it, they have what's called lost losers contracts, where they actually know they're not going to make any money. In fact, they're going to be in the hole. But because they are building up a certain area, they're building up their presence and brand in an area, they're willing to take that loss. But there's a lot of companies now who are really rejecting clients. I know personally of a company in Florida, a pretty good sized medium company, who they don't do anything but armed security now because it's become so dangerous. So they pass up unarmed locations, and there are companies out there who won't take a contract for less than XYZ, and they're holding the line. That means you're going to have less business, but you're also going to have better business. And that client, that customer recognizes the quality of service, and they're willing to pay more. And so we have to sell ourselves better on what we bring and why we need to have a higher billable. And there's a lot of times when companies, they don't care. They just want whoever's the cheapest. And you know that from experience. So
Right.
when we're talking to contract security companies, and their employees, we want to show the value of having that training, but we also want to speak to the point that this is actually a career, not just a stopover job or a paycheck for a couple of weeks or months until I can find something better. One of the things that we are seeing in this industry across the country is that many employees are coming and staying. If you treat them right, if you promote them, if you give them, and it's not always about money. Sometimes it's just about recognition. And we have a great awards program. We presented 57 people this year. Every year we have an awards week. We present people across the country with awards. If you recognize and value your employees, sometimes, that's what they want, they need. It's not really all about money. And so you can add value to your company, to your clients, just on building a better mousetrap to retain those employees. Because as you know, it's very expensive to recruit, to train, to hire. It's just, in the security industry, it really is a revolving door, unfortunately. But some companies are seeing people stay much more longer than they, have in the past.
Yeah, turnover in any service-related industry, is certainly one of the main things you're fighting. And then, in today's hiring climate, you're also juxtaposing that with this, natural state of unemployment where everybody that wants to have a full-time job or a part-time job, a permanent part-time job, has one. So you're having to steal from either your competitors or other industries to get good people. And so, anything you can do to retain certainly is important. It's hard to get good people in. And so, I think, taking care of the employee and making sure the officer understands the significance of what they're doing is incredibly important. I'm thankful to work for a firm that has been that way, like I said, for almost 14 years now. I started as a frontline security officer. So the fact that I'm sitting where I'm sitting in a management position is indicative that you can make a career out of it. And so we try to do that certainly, and then make sure the officers understand those pathways, and that we sort of grease the wheel so that they can efficiently move upward and even, horizontally, even if it's just not a higher paying position, but something closer to their house, or with less of a commute, or an industry, a vertical market that they would enjoy being a part of. Some people really like working in healthcare security. Some people really like working at entertainment venues. So trying to feel all that out. And if we expect a client to treat our people like professionals and pay them like professionals, we certainly have to try our best to do the same thing. And it's a slow moving ship, but I do feel like the general public and the culture surrounding what private security is and stands for, I do think is shifting in the right direction. It's going to take organizations like yours, and then I think, as what you alluded to, the companies themselves to do the industry as a whole a service by not trying to be the cheapest, but trying to be the best value through excellence. That's kind of our mantra, and we certainly know what it's like to turn a client down based on wage or bill rate, ability to escalate a pay over years to an employee. So that's the right way to do business, even if it's not the right way to gain revenue quickly. It's certainly the right kind of revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not going to retain everybody. Everyone doesn't have the same goal. Some people are just looking for something temporary, but there's going to be those who are looking for something long-term and even career-wise. And one of the things that we offer through our memberships is, I don't know if you guys had a chance to take a look at the membership benefits, but one of the things that we offer our members is mentoring. And so we actually have been able to take several of our members through the years from being a guard to being a business owner. So they have their own security companies now. And so it really has a lot to do with how much the company will invest in their employees as well. So if you're not willing to invest, if you just see them as just a body, a number, then you're going to get what you put into it, like anything else. And fortunately for you guys, you're doing the right stuff. And so along the way, you are going to keep those long-term employees, and everybody's going to benefit from it.
Can you kind of go over a little bit, just from a 30,000 foot perspective, the difference in between the individual membership and kind of just the basic benefits of that, and then a corporate membership, and what companies stand to gain from a corporate membership perspective?
Well, let's start with the corporate membership. The corporate membership includes 5 of their top tier management personnel. The corporate membership, each individual gets all of the individual member benefits, but also the corporate, we give them assistance through marketing, some legal services through our network of attorneys. We don't represent you, of course, but we do try to help guide you in legal matters. We keep you apprised of industry information, legislative things happening in your area. We're your inside scoop, in other words. We're also your partners. Our school has a job placement service, so we work with some of our POI members through Armor College, where we help some of the students who go through security classes to get a job right away, or even EMTs. There are a number of contracts coming online that require security officers to be EMTs. You can't go into an auto manufacturer plant without your security officer being an EMT, or at least what's called an EMR, which is an emergency medical responder. And so we help job placement. We help to match people, our members, with companies. And so being a corporate member, we pretty much have the scoop on what's happening in your area, and with our news department and legal assistance and other things that we have over the last 16 years been able to put together. We apply all that to your benefits. An individual has about 50 member benefits. They have auto and hotel discounts. They get training discounts. They get a $5,000 death benefit, which is something very unique to our industry. There's nobody, not even as is, that offers that. We also provide them with an updated a will and testament that's state specific from a law firm. We also give them mentoring programs. We assist them with finding a job if they're unemployed. and we have a lot of personal services that we help them with. They also have access to our management team. The one thing that we've run into over the years is that companies hesitate referring their employees to us because they think we're going to help them sue the company, and we don't do that. So what we found over the years is that we provide a very unique service for a small amount of money to our members, whether it be individual or corporate, and we don't lose members. They don't disappear, and corporate members don't disappear. In fact, they always bring on new referrals for us. So, 16 years, we've never had a complaint. You can't go to the internet and search us out and find one complaint against us. We've never been sued. We're doing something right.
Right.
Now, Rick, that might be a good time to specifically highlight the URL of the website, because I imagine after this that a lot of security officers who were unaware at this point of your organization might want to check it out.
It's privateofficer.org. And you can find us on all the social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. We have somebody that does all that for us, so in-house. And like we mentioned earlier about having to hire production people and all that, we actually have had to do all that. So at privateofficer.org, you'll also be able to join our radio show, which comes out twice a week. And we have a big following there. We've been on air for 16 years, and we started off with the Atlanta radio station and brought it to internet because we can reach a wider audience there.
Fantastic. Well, I think this has been a great introduction into your organization. I think it's, as I said earlier, Rick, it's right on point with what we're trying to do with the podcast, which is just highlight awareness of all the great activity and the important role that private security plays in our communities. I mean, we had an officer a few weeks ago that was working a post, and the customer had an employee that had a cardiac event, and the officer sprinted to the AED equipment and got it back to this individual, and essentially saved her life. And those kinds of things are going on across. It's not just here in Birmingham. They're going on around the globe each and every day, and probably on an hourly basis. And we want to highlight those positive things. We want to provide tools and resources for security professionals to grow and improve, and it looks like you guys are doing the exact same thing. So it's been a real pleasure speaking with you this morning.
Yes, and be sure to contact us anytime you have an officer involved in a situation like that. We are more than glad to present them with an award, either in person or through one of your managers. And in fact, we're heading down on Monday to a commission meeting in North Carolina where we're presenting a law enforcement officer for saving the life of a child on a school, an SRO. And we travel all over the place doing the same thing. So I think that doing these type of things out in the public begins to recognize the importance of security, and that adds value to, you as a company and to the industry. So, that's what we're here for.
Awesome. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Really fascinating stuff. Once again, privateofficer.org is the URL for Private Officer International. Rick, I'm sure this won't be our last conversation, so I'm glad to have you out there doing what you're doing, and look forward to the next conversation.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here, and if there's anything we can do for you in the future, please let us know.
Certainly.
You might not want to ask Mark that, because he's going to probably ask you to fix his truck so that we can start time next time.
That's definitely not one thing I can do. I can't change my oil.
That's what delegation's for, right?
Exactly. Well, I've worked my way up to the point where I do delegate that kind of stuff. So,
Awesome.
all right. Thanks again, Rick.
All right.
Have a good
time.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in and with a conversation with Rick from Private Officer International. Stay tuned for hopefully we'll have next week. We'll be pumping out these things more regularly, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Thin Yellow Line podcast. Find us on YouTube by searching Thin Yellow Line Podcast or on your favorite podcast hosting site. See you next time.